What is good, Steelers Nation? Just wanted to hop on here today to give some quick thoughts on two Steelers trades. Right before the trade deadline, Pittsburgh's acquired wide receiver Mike Williams from the Jets in exchange for a fifth-round pick next season. In addition to that, they sent a seventh-round selection to Green Bay in exchange for edge rusher Preston Smith. Just before I get into analyzing these moves individually, just do me a favor, hit that like button, subscribe, hit the bell. It's just a free, easy way to support the channel. Also, I'd love to hear you guys, drop your comments on whether or not you like the moves that they made today. You think they moved the needle? What do you think about these two players? And then also, just don't forget, tomorrow, big NFL draft video drops on the channel that we recorded earlier today. I'm super excited about that. I'm ready to talk some NFL draft for you guys. And I think you guys are really going to enjoy the discussion over there as well. So, yeah, it's been an interesting 24 hours. I didn't want to just leave you guys hanging. I am going to try to get through some of the film from these guys tonight, hopefully. But I do want to talk about Preston Smith first, just because we already kind of talked about Mike Williams a little bit on this channel, and I've talked about him a little bit more on Twitter. But Preston Smith, edge rusher from the Packers, this was a move that honestly I don't think really anyone saw coming. There were some rumblings that they were kind of searching around for a defensive lineman, but it's kind of interesting to me that they elected to go out and get an edge rusher. So just like a little bit about Preston Smith. Smith is about to turn 32 years old. He's been a long time NFL starter in the league. Got drafted by Washington. He's kind of what I think is interesting most about the acquisition of him is like he's kind of a different archetype of player than the guys that they currently have on the roster. Like if you just look at the way that he's built and just the way that he plays, he's actually really nothing like the other Steelers edge rushers that they've got, which I think is kind of unique. The way that Smith is kind of constructed, he's 6'5", 271 pounds, so he's a bigger dude. He's also got 34-inch arms, so all of that stuff is kind of unique. But just watching him play is kind of been interesting because one of the things about Smith that he has like a really good reputation for is like he's always been a pretty solid run defender, a guy that can set the edge, especially as he's gotten older, got a little bit more stronger over the course of his career. So I think from that perspective, it makes a lot of sense. And, you get this guy for a seventh round pick. You look at the cost to acquire him, hit the rest of his salary is about $2 million for the rest of the season. And then he does have 2 more years on his contract, but they're like $13 and $14 million cap hits, but none of the money's guaranteed. So essentially what this is it's a rental for the rest of the season. And then, depending on how he plays, maybe there's a chance that they could figure something out next year in the offseason going forward. I think the Packers, obviously, by trading him away for the 7th round pick, were pretty much admitting that they were ready to play some of their younger guys over there. They did go through a defensive coordinator change with Jeff Havley, so the scheme has changed a little bit. Smith's production has been down this year as well, so they want to get some younger guys in there, see what they look like in the new defense. I understand it to an extent, but I am a little bit surprised just based on reputation alone, because Smith's been a long-time starter in the league, and just off reputation, I thought that someone would beat a 7th-round pick for this dude, because when you get into the playoffs, everybody's looking for pass rushers. I mean, you guys heard all the different teams around the NFL that were looking for pass rushers. I'm just surprised that nobody wanted this dude for more than a 7th-round pick. So essentially for free, I like the move. I don't necessarily think, from what I understand, that it means it's time to be worried about anything that's going on the roster. I've heard nothing but encouraging things about Nick Herbig. It sounds like he's getting closer and closer to return. Obviously, Alex Highsmith, TJ Watt are both going to be the guys when they're healthy, but adding cheap depth, a guy that can come in and play 15 snaps a game, I'm all for that. I definitely think that that's a good idea to try and keep Watt and Highsmith as fresh as possible, as healthy as possible as they head into this stretch run. We talked about it on Monday in that video. Second half of the schedule, a lot more daunting. It's going to be a lot more challenging, facing a lot more better quarterbacks and offenses in general. I think, the more pass rushers that you can get on a team that really isn't blitzing really at all right now, they want to get home with 4. The more guys that you could have that could potentially win some one-on-one matchups, I think that makes a ton of sense. Smith's game as a pass rusher is a little bit different than the Steelers' current group. He's not as explosive off the ball, but he does like really good with his hands. He's more of a technician, has a little bit of power to him. He will go to speed to power or use some more power moves than we're used to seeing from the Steelers guys. But it's kind of interesting. I don't know that this is I know a lot of people have said that this is maybe just a replacement for like what DeMarvin Leal is. I don't really know that I see that personally, because I don't think that Smith, he can kind of play a little bit of a spinner role. You can use him on some sub packages, and he can do some things as a twist guy, as a stunt guy, and he can line up over the guard on occasion. But this isn't necessarily a guy that's going to put like you want with his hand in the ground necessarily, in my opinion, based on the tape that I've seen so far. And this isn't necessarily a 1-for-1 with Marcus Golden, but that's probably like more of what you're expecting or what the expectations should be around this player, that he can come in, be a really, really good fourth edge rusher, which Golden was last year. We saw him have some good moments. And, I think that this, for the price, to me, even if this is like a short-term rental type of thing, I'm all for it. You get a good, in my opinion, a solid player for a 7th round pick, even for 8 games. Sign me up, man. We'll see how much juice he has left as a pass rusher. But I mean, I've already went back and looked at some film, or just over his pressures over the past couple of years. I mean, he had 2 strip sacks against Christian Darrisaw, one of the best left tackles in the game, just last season. So I know the production's down. You look at the pass rush win rate, pressures, all that stuff. I completely understand that. And there's a reason why they wanted to move on and play the other guys. But I don't think this dude just completely fell off a cliff, even though he's about to turn 32 years old. We'll see what the tape says. I do want to get into a film room of him and put that up on the channel for you guys, because I know a lot of people, even like myself, I'm not like super familiar with him because he spent like his entire career in the NFC, and those type of guys. Even I wouldn't say that Smith was ever considered like a star by any means, but he was always a good player. I just haven't watched him much individually, other than just like live broadcast games or anytime we've been preparing to play the Packers in the past. So I'm excited to watch this film and get the film room up. You guys can probably expect that. Hopefully, if I can get enough time, I would love to post that tomorrow as well. But we'll see. Like I said, I got to get the time, and I want to make sure I put out a good product for you guys. I do want to talk a little bit about Mike Williams as well. This is a name that has been rumored for quite some time. If you guys think about back to the summer, Mike Williams was a guy that the Steelers were pretty interested in. They tried to get him in on a free agent visit, but unfortunately, he scheduled a visit with the Jets just a couple days prior. The Jets never let him leave the building, gave him a pretty, in my opinion, irresponsible contract because he was coming off an ACL injury. They signed him to a 1-year, $10 million deal. But the good news is most of that $10 million was in the form of a signing bonus. So what that means is the Steelers are actually getting him extremely cheap from a financial perspective. He only has about $620,000 left on his contract for the rest of the season before he's a free agent in 2025, because the rest of that money was paid out in bonus structure. So that's all they're responsible for. So really cheap. The 5th round pick in compensation, I think it was a little bit steep in terms of like an asking price, and I'll kind of get into some of the reasons why. But want to talk a little bit about Mike Williams' skill set. I think he's probably a more familiar player for Steelers fans, especially because he's been around a long time. Receivers, you see those guys, you play fantasy football, all that stuff. But Williams is kind of like one of those throwback X-receiver types. Does a lot of things well, in my opinion, in terms of like in his prime, what he could do. You think back to even his days at Clemson, he kind of came out as this throwback X-receiver type who could win a lot of jump ball situations. And that's exactly, what he's done over the course of his career. And you just look at some of the numbers, and they're really impressive, man. Like, just the hands are fantastic. I think he owns about like a 6% career drop rate for a guy who, maybe wasn't ever like considered like a true number 1 wide receiver, but maybe like a really, really high end too at his peak. Pretty good drop rate, all things considered, and especially the type of targets that he was receiving out there on the boundary. But yeah, 6% drop rate over the course of his career. And then you just look at like the contested catches, and some people will talk a lot about contested catch rate, 50-50 balls, but like Mike Williams, like if you give him a good ball in a good spot, like he's going to come down with it more often than not. You look at his career numbers in contested catch situations, according to Pro Football Focus, he's 96 for 177, 54% contested catch rate. Like anything over 40% contested catch rate in like their charting is usually pretty good. Like that's way above like what George Pickens has been. And like we know that he can win in those types of situations. I think with Williams in particular, there is some overlap between him and Pickens' game just in terms of like the way that they want to play. Obviously, Pickens has primarily been playing at the X receiver spot. But Williams is just like a bigger player. He's 6'4", 218 pounds. But not only that, like he's got like 33.5-inch arms. So this dude like just has a ton of length. The catch radius is very vast. Kind of the routes that he runs extremely well or did at his peak. Stretch the field vertically, a lot of fades, a lot of go balls, back shoulders. You can trust him on all of those. Very good. Like he can use his body at the top of the route to create some space for himself to break back on comebacks, any type of slant or in breaker or post route. He has the ability, like with his frame, to box out defenders. It's just really difficult to get over top of him because how big he is. You just don't. There's just aren't a lot of guys that are 6'4", 220 pounds moving around like this in the NFL. So, so why was he available? I think that it's difficult because Rodgers, I've mentioned this in the past, but like he's somebody that likes the way that likes to play a game in a very particular way. And like if you're not on the same page as him a lot, you can kind of fall in the doghouse. We've already seen like Mike Williams get blamed multiple times in the media this year because of some mishaps, things like that. But more than anything, like I don't necessarily care about the production being what it is. You just look at through the first half of the season, he's got 12 catches, 166 yards, only like a little bit more production really than like a guy like Van Jefferson, who I think the Steelers have been rightfully looking to kind of replace and put into a more suitable role for him. I'm not really worried about like just necessarily the production itself. I just more what I've seen on film just over the past couple of weeks when these kind of trade rumors started to fire back up and Williams was back on the market. Started watching some film, just like what he looked like running routes. I don't see the same amount of burst or juice off the ball to threaten guys vertically. He doesn't look the same in terms of me when I look at him physically. But it is notable because, last season he got off to a pretty solid start. He had a really good year in 2022, I believe, with the Chargers. You look at the numbers there, he had like 900 receiving yards, 4 touchdowns. It was a really productive season for him. And then, he got off to a decent start last year. I even watched like all 3 of those games when I went back and watched this film as well. And he was pretty productive. And then he tears his ACL. And it's always tough. Like, I think, anytime a guy tears his ACL, it's unpredictable what they're going to look like when they come back. And that's kind of why when I saw that the Jets gave him that contract, I was like, that seems bizarre to me, just because it's just such a risky thing. But I do think that there's a chance that Williams does continue to like round into form as the season progresses and he gets more comfortable on the knee and starts to regain some of the confidence in himself. I think that that's like one of the things you look at on film. Like he just doesn't look like the same player. He's not getting open at the same rate. Not that he was ever this crazy separator, but I think this idea that like he just couldn't separate at all and like you were just consistently throwing to him when he was blanketed, like that wasn't necessarily true. Like when he was at his peak, I think like he was probably an average-ish separator. It's just he's always been one of those guys that has like a true trump card in terms of the way that he could play the ball in the air and just how special he was in that area, that he was able to kind of get by and be a good receiver, even though he was just an average separator. Right now, I feel like he's not even as an average separator on film. So we'll see what it looks like. I mean, I like I said, I think that the Steelers were right to go out and look for an upgrade. And I definitely think that even this version of Mike Williams, because I mean, the dude didn't forget how to catch back shoulders. He didn't forget how to contested catch balls down the sideline. We know that Russ loves to operate on the boundary. He doesn't care if you're tightly covered. Like that's the other thing about the Mike Williams potential connection is he doesn't necessarily need a ton of separation. Like Russ will give you 50-50 balls all day long. If a team wants to play single high, we've already seen the willingness for him to push the ball down the field and give his guys a chance. So Williams is going to be given some chances, and I definitely like his odds of coming down with those at a more consistent rate than a guy like Van Jefferson. But I don't know what he is right now as a player and like how much of an upgrade he is. If he's really going to be like that much of a positive in terms of if he does have to, accrue more volume in this type of offense. The other thing that I'll say about this that I like is, there is some overlap between him and Pickens' game. Williams has played mostly on the ball, but I do like it just because fortunately Pickens has been healthy over the course of this season, which has been great because if he wasn't, I don't think they have another player on the roster that's actually capable of playing on the ball like full time because you're going to be getting pressed at a higher rate, especially on like if you're on the backside and stuff like that. Williams could do that. So he's a good player versus press, has a release package. Like I said, I want to see him get back to form. I think like best case scenario, in my opinion, it would kind of be surprising to me if he just comes out, next week or whatever and starts looking like the Mike Williams of old. I don't think that that's necessarily the case. I would just like to gradually see kind of improvement over the course of the season. And maybe he makes a couple big plays for you, like catches a couple 50-50 balls in some big games down the stretch, or maybe in the playoffs or something like that. And then they could maybe bring it back next season when he's like fully back from that ACL injury. And hopefully he gets at least close to like where he was at his peak with the Chargers. But overall, like I said, I think the price was a little bit steep. I thought that they would be able to get him for around like a 6th. I don't think a 5th round pick in general, like generally speaking, is a steep price. I'm not saying that that's like some crazy draft capital that you just can't be spending. It's just like I would have probably preferred them to be a little bit more aggressive, try to get maybe a little bit more of a difference maker, somebody that could create a little bit more space for not just themselves but others on offense. And I think that could have helped them just a little bit more. But overall, I mean, just as a 1-for-1 comparison, like I do think he's better than Van Jefferson. I think that they needed to be in the market for a receiver, and they kind of pushed themselves into or backed themselves into a corner, right? Just out of desperation more than anything else, just because they've struck out so many different times, and it was getting late. There was only a couple hours left to the trade deadline. I know, like even as of last night, they were like searching for other guys, and just things didn't work out. So overall, like the moves are fine. I don't necessarily know that either of these moves are necessarily huge needle movers in the form of like this is going to take this team true contender status in the AFC. I do think we're going to find out just how serious this team is. Like I said, over the next month, they start playing some really good teams, and like we're gonna get a pretty good feel, in my opinion, for like if this team's capable of winning the playoffs, and we'll have that answer probably over the next 3 or 4 weeks. So overall, thank you guys for listening to all my thoughts on both these players. If you guys have other like questions, comments, concerns, anything like that, drop those in the comments. Like I said, I want to go back and watch even more film on these two guys. I'm really excited. It's a busy week for the channel. We got a lot of stuff. We did the video yesterday just on the stock watch, and then the NFL draft video will be tomorrow. And then who knows? I will try to get a Preston Smith film room up in the next 24 to 36 hours, something like that. If you guys want a Mike Williams film room, definitely let me know that as well. I wasn't necessarily planning on doing one, but not necessarily opposed to either if that's something that you guys are interested in. So just let me know. As always, enjoy the rest of your week. Peace and love.